Welcome to Shiver Audiobooks. We're thrilled to have you back with us again. They say your phone is your lifeline, a comforting thought in a world that never sleeps. But in the age of the invisible grid, your lifeline can become a noose. The truth isn't found in headlines. It's hidden in a flickering glitch on a screen you were never meant to notice. We all believe we are safe in our vacation sanctuaries. We trust the privacy of our smart apartments and the security of our getaways. But what happens when your holiday is actually a harvest? What happens when a routine week of fun for Jason and his friends isn't just about making memories, but about becoming a memory for a pay-per-view audience? You are about to enter a world of technical noir and systemic betrayal. A world where a group of unsuspecting students is forced to step out of the quiet safety of their lives and into a global crossfire of silicon and blood. From the claustrophobic, camera-lined walls of the Obsidian suite to the hollowed-out mechanical graveyards beneath a neon theme park. This is not a story of a technical glitch. This is a story of a digital uprising. Because when a billion-dollar empire has been programmed to watch you die, the only way to save your soul is to break the lens. Before we begin, if you enjoy stories that unearth the shadows of the system, make sure to like the video and subscribe to the channel. Your support helps us keep the signal alive. This is live streamed, read for you by me. Chapter 1. The Road to Solace. The silver SUV was a pressurized cabin of forced nostalgia. Outside, the highway blurred into a monotonous stretch of gray asphalt and dense pine trees. But inside, the air was thick with the scent of salt and vinegar chips and the restless energy of 7 people who hadn't been in a room together for this long since graduation. Jason leaned his forehead against the cool glass of the middle row window. He felt the vibration of the tires in his teeth. In his lap, his smartphone sat like a dead weight. Suddenly, the screen flickered. A jagged line of neon green static sliced through his wallpaper, followed by a brief, distorted burst of audio that sounded like a high-pitched squeal. Jason frowned, tapping the screen aggressively. "Glitchy piece of junk," he muttered. "You say something, J-Man?" Mark called out from the driver's seat. Mark looked exactly like what he was, a former varsity quarterback who had transitioned seamlessly into a high-earning sales job. He drove with one hand at 12 o'clock on the steering wheel, his expensive watch catching the sunlight every time he turned. "Just my phone," Jason said, clearing his throat. "It's acting up. Probably the heat. Or maybe it's the universe telling you to put away," Sarah chimed in from the passenger seat. She turned around, her bright eyes scanning the group with the practiced efficiency of a project manager. She had a color-coded binder on her lap, the Vacation Bible, as Leo called it. "We're almost there, guys. 7 days. No work emails, no thesis stress. Just us and the Titans Peak coasters." Sarah was the glue, but even glue shows cracks under pressure. Jason noticed the way her fingers gripped the edge of her binder until her knuckles turned white. She and Mark had been a couple for 6 years, but the rumors of Mark's wandering eye during his business trips had been circling their friend group like vultures. This trip wasn't just a vacation. It was Sarah's last-ditch effort to save their relationship. "I'm already on a digital detox," Chloe announced, though she was currently holding a gimbal-mounted camera in front of her face. "I'm just recording B-roll for the after-movie. My followers love the raw and unedited look." Leo, sitting squeezed between Jason and Chloe, snorted. "Nothing about your life is raw, Chloe. You'd filter your own funeral if the lighting was right." "Shut up, Leo," Chloe snapped, but there was no real venom in it. They had a sibling-like friction that went back to middle school. Leo was the group's jester, the one who kept the mood light to avoid talking about the fact that he'd been fired from 3 jobs in the last year. He needed this break more than anyone, mostly because he was currently broke and Mark was fronting his share of the rent. In the very back row, Maya had her noise-canceling headphones around her neck. She caught Jason's eye and gave him a small, weary smile. Years ago, in their sophomore year, they had been a thing. It had ended not with a bang, but with a slow fade-out that left a lingering, awkward tenderness between them. She knew Jason better than anyone else in the car. She knew that when he went quiet, it wasn't because he was bored, but because he was analyzing. "You okay?" She mouthed over the noise of the car. Jason nodded, though he didn't feel okay. A strange sense of being watched had been prickling at the back of his neck since they'd crossed the county line. "Yo! Wake up the kid!" Mark shouted, gesturing toward Toby, who was slumped against the window and back, snoring softly. Toby was Mark's younger cousin, a sweet-natured kid who'd been brought along to even out the numbers. He was the innocent of the group, the one they all felt an instinctive need to protect. Leo reached back and flicked Toby's ear. "Rise and shine, Tobes. We're entering the kill zone." Toby jerked awake, blinking blearily. "Are we at the park?" "Almost," Sarah said, pointing ahead. "Look." As the SUV crested the final hill, the horizon exploded with neon colors. The theme park, Aetheria World, lay in the valley below like a sprawling, mechanical beast. Even from miles away, they could hear the faint, ghostly echoes of screams from the drop towers. "The apartment is just 5 minutes from the main gate," Sarah explained, her voice rising with excitement. "The listing said it's a smart living concept. Fully integrated tech, voice-controlled everything, and a private deck overlooking the park's nightly fireworks. And get this, the owner gave it to us for 60% off because they're testing the user experience for a new hospitality app." "See?" Mark laughed, hitting the steering wheel. "I told you guys I'd find the best deal. A luxury penthouse for the price of a roadside motel. We're living like kings this week." Jason felt another vibration in his pocket. He pulled his phone out. The screen was black, except for a single line of white text that stayed for only a second before vanishing. Buffering, stream stable. He blinked, and it was gone. His heart hammered against his ribs. A glitch, he told himself. Just a virus or a bug in the OS. But as Mark turned the SUV onto a private gravel driveway lined with towering hedges that blocked out the sun, Jason couldn't shake the feeling that they weren't just checking into an apartment. They were checking into a stage. "Here we are," Mark said, pulling the car to a stop in front of a sleek, charcoal-gray building with tinted windows that looked like obsidian. "The Nest, our home for the next 7 days." The engine cut out. Silence rushed into the car, heavy and sudden. Above them, a small black dome, a security camera, swiveled almost imperceptibly, tracking the SUV as the doors opened and the 7 friends stepped out into humid afternoon air. Chapter 2. The Obsidian Suite. The building was a monolith of glass and dark steel, tucked away at the end of a private road where the trees grew too thick to let in much light. It was called the Obsidian Suite, though the booking confirmation Sarah held in her hand simply referred to it as the Nest. "Keyless entry," Mark announced, his voice echoing off the concrete walls of the parking garage. "The owner sent a temporary digital token to my phone. Watch this." As Mark approached the heavy, charcoal-colored door, a hidden scanner emitted a soft, red pulse of light. It swept over his face, then his phone. With a satisfying clunk of heavy machinery, the locks disengaged. A synthetic, female voice, smooth as silk and cold as ice, spoke from a hidden speaker. "Welcome, Mark. Welcome, guests. Your 7-day experience begins now. Please make yourselves at home." "Creepy," Leo muttered, though he was the first to push past Mark into the foyer. "Does she come with a stop talking button, or are we living in a sci-fi movie now?" As the 7 of them filed in, the lights flickered on automatically, not all at once, but in a choreographed sequence that led them from the hallway into the main living area. It was stunning. Floor-to-ceiling windows looked out over the theme park in the distance, but the interior was all minimalist luxury. White leather sofas, a kitchen island made of polished black marble, and walls adorned with digital art that shifted colors as they walked by. "Oh my God," Chloe whispered, already extending her selfie stick. "The aesthetic is everything. Look at the backlighting in the kitchen. My feed is going to explode." "Check out the bar," Mark shouted, throwing his keys onto the marble counter. "Stocked. Top shelf stuff, too. Sarah, babe, you outdid yourself with this find." Sarah beamed, though Jason noticed her eyes darting around the room, as if she were mentally checking items off a list. "It's part of the user experience test," she reminded them. "We just have to leave a detailed review at the end of the week." Basically, we're being paid in luxury to just exist. While the others ran to claim their bedrooms, Jason stayed in the center of the living room. He felt a strange vibration in his palm. He pulled out his phone. The screen was flickering again, but this time it was different. A series of rapidly scrolling numbers and IP addresses danced across the display. He moved toward the wall-mounted climate control panel. As he got closer, his phone's signal bars jumped from 2 to 5, then dropped to 0, then back to 5. It was as if the house was screaming at his device in a language it didn't understand. "Jason, you look like you're staring at a ghost." He turned to see Maya standing by the balcony door. She hadn't joined the mad dash for the best bedroom. She was watching him, her arms crossed over her chest. "Just the phone again," Jason said, trying to sound casual. "The Wi-Fi in here must be incredibly powerful. My phone is struggling to keep up with the handshakes." "The whole place feels intense," Maya agreed, lowering her voice. "Too clean. Too perfect. Did you notice the sensors in the hallway? They aren't just motion detectors for the lights. They're thermal." Jason looked up. Tucked into the corner of the ceiling was a small, recessed dome. It was matte black, designed to blend in with the shadow of the crown molding. He stepped to the left. The dome didn't move, but he saw a tiny, rhythmic pulse of infrared light coming from within. "Security," Jason reasoned. "A place this expensive? They probably want to make sure we don't steal the art." "Hey, everyone, get in here." Toby's voice rang out from the end of the hallway. The group gathered in the master suite. It was a massive room dominated by a king-size bed and a transparent glass shower that sat right in the middle of the space. But that wasn't what Toby was pointing at. Mounted on the wall was a 100-inch screen. It wasn't showing a movie. It was showing a grid of 7 icons, each with a name: Mark, Sarah, Jason, Maya, Chloe, Leo, Toby. Underneath each name was a heart rate monitor and a social engagement bar. "The hell is this?" Leo laughed, poking at the screen. As he touched his name, the icon glowed. "Leo, heart rate 88 BPM. Status, excited." "It's the Smart Stay interface," Sarah explained, reading from her binder. "The house uses wearable tech. There are bracelets in the nightstands to track our wellness during the stay. It adjusts the music, the lighting, and even the room temperature based on our moods." "I am not wearing a mood ring for a house," Chloe scoffed, though she was already reaching into the nightstand to find the sleek, black silicone band. "Wait, these are actually kind of cute. Very minimalist." One by one, they put them on. It felt like a game, a high-tech toy to play with while they waited for the fireworks to start. Jason was the last to put his on. As the strap clicked into place, he felt a tiny, sharp prick on the inside of his wrist, like a static shock or a needle. He flinched, pulling the band away, but it was already locked. On the big screen, his name lit up: Jason, heart rate 112 BPM. Status, anomalous. "Whoa, J-Man," Mark joked, clapping him on the back. "Relax. You're at 112? It's just a vacation, buddy. Stop overthinking everything and let's get a drink." The group drifted back to the living room, the sound of popping corks and laughter filling the air. Mark started a playlist, and the house responded instantly, the walls glowing a warm amber orange to match the party vibe. Jason stayed behind for a moment, staring at the screen. He pulled his phone out one more time. The glitch was back, but this time, the camera app had opened on its own. The screen showed a grainy, distorted image. It took Jason a few seconds to realize what he was looking at. It was a top-down view of the master suite. He could see himself standing there. He could see the top of his own head. He looked up at the ceiling. There was no visible camera, just the smooth black surface of the smart tiles. He switched his phone off, his heart hammering even faster now. On the wall, the display updated instantly. Jason, heart rate 125 BPM. Status, elevated. The house was watching. And for the first time, Jason realized the house wasn't just adjusting to their moods. It was feeding on them. Chapter 3. The First Night's Tribute. The evening fell like a heavy, purple curtain over the landscape. In the distance, Aetheria World lit up like a city on fire, Millions of LED lights outlined the roller coasters, which stood like glowing skeletons against the horizon. The sound of distant screams of joy and the mechanical rattle of the rides drifted on the wind toward the balcony of the Obsidian suite. Inside, the atmosphere was euphoric, but artificial. Mark had activated the house's party mode. The walls now pulsed in a deep, ruby-red rhythm, and the built-in speakers pumped a deep, vibrating bass into the room, a frequency Jason could feel in the hollow of his teeth. A toast to the best week of our lives. Mark shouted, holding up a glass of overpriced champagne. He stood with his arm around Sarah, who finally seemed truly relaxed for the first time that day. The rest of the group followed suit, their glasses clinking in the red glow. Jason drank, but he didn't taste it. His attention was constantly drawn to the black band around his wrist. The thing felt warmer than his own skin. He found himself unconsciously picking at the silicone strap, trying to shift the sensor that seemed to be constantly pricking into his pulse. "Look at this," Chloe exclaimed, sitting on the sofa with her laptop. "The Wi-Fi here is insane. I just uploaded a 4K video in 3 seconds. It's like we're plugged directly into the backbone of the internet." "Not just that," Leo added, standing by the bar experimenting with the house's smart mixer. "I pressed a button for a margarita, and the thing knew exactly how much salt I liked. I didn't enter it anywhere. How does it know that?" "Algorithms, Leo," Sarah laughed. "The app probably scanned your social media for your order history when you accepted the terms and conditions. Everything is connected these days." Jason walked away from the noise toward the large glass wall overlooking the park. He tried to turn his phone on again, but the screen remained black except for a pulsing white icon in the corner, an eye with a line through it. A privacy icon or a warning? As he checked his reflection in the glass, he saw something that made his blood freeze. In the reflection of the living room behind him, he saw the rest of the group laughing and dancing, but above their heads, hovering in the shadows of the ceiling, he saw small red pinpricks of light. There were dozens of them. They didn't move like smoke detectors. They moved like pupils, tracking the movements of the people in the room in perfect sync. He turned around abruptly. The lights were gone. The walls were smooth and dark once more. "Jason, come dance." "Stop with a serious face," Maya called out. She walked over to him and took his hands. Her palms were damp, and her heart rate monitor on the large screen in the corner spiked to 110 BPM. "Don't you find this too much?" Jason whispered, pulling her closer so the others couldn't hear them over the music. "What do you mean?" "The house. The sensors. It feels like we're in a laboratory, Maya. Have you seen those screens? They aren't just tracking our heart rates. There are statistics I don't understand. Engagement level. Viewer satisfaction. What does viewer satisfaction have to do with a wellness app?" Maya looked at the screen in the corner. "Maybe it's gamification? You know, the more fun we have, the more points we score for a discount on the next booking." She wanted to believe it. They all wanted to believe it. The alternative was too insane to contemplate. Around 10 o'clock that night, the house's first real surprise began. The music suddenly dimmed to a whisper. The red lights in the room shifted to a cold, clinical white. "Attention guests!" The silky voice of the house AI spoke. "The evening tribute is about to begin. Please direct your attention to the balcony." "Ooh, the fireworks show!" Toby cried enthusiastically. He ran to the sliding glass doors and threw them open. The rest followed, drawn by the promise of a spectacle. Outside, the air was cold and clear. Exactly above the castle of the theme park, the fireworks erupted, but it wasn't ordinary fireworks. The explosions formed shapes in the sky. First, the logos of the park's major sponsors, but then it changed. The colors grew darker, deep purples and blood reds. The smoke from the explosions lingered in an unnatural way, illuminated by lasers from park. A face formed in the smoke. A giant, laughing mask looking down over the valley. In the suite behind them, the large screen began to flicker. Jason, who had stepped onto the balcony last, looked over his shoulder. The screen no longer showed their vitals. It showed a chat box. Millions of messages scrolled past at an unreadable speed. "Kill the loud one first." The blonde in the dress is boring. I bet $50K on the quiet guy. Show us the house. Show us the tools. Jason's heart pounded so hard he thought it would crack his ribs. He looked at his wristband. The light on it was no longer green or blue. It was solid, glowing red. Guys, Jason began, his voice hoarse. We need to leave. Now. But no one heard him. The fireworks finale had begun. A series of deafening blasts that made the ground beneath their feet tremble. Mark had his arms spread wide, soaking in the view, while the others cheered. At that moment, Jason noticed a glitch on his phone again. The screen lit up in his pocket. He pulled it out. The camera app was active again. It showed a view of the kitchen. He saw a small hatch in the black marble wall slide open silently. A mechanical arm, thin as a spider's leg, emerged. It held something, a small glass ampoule filled with a colorless liquid. The arm moved toward the open bottles of alcohol on the counter. Jason wanted to scream, but a new explosion of fireworks drowned out everything. He watched as the arm let a few drops fall into a bottle of vodka that Leo had just been drinking from. As the arm withdrew, a new text appeared on Jason's phone. Voting closed. Selection. Leo. Execution method. The house. Jason looked at Leo, who just took a large swig from his glass and laughed broadly at Chloe's camera. This is the good stuff. Leo shouted. Jason knew it had begun. They were no longer guests. They were the content. Chapter 4. The Gilded Cage Snapped Shut. The celebration on the balcony was reaching a fever pitch. The final burst of fireworks, a cascade of shimmering gold and crimson, lit up the faces of the 7 friends. To anyone watching from the ground, they looked like the picture of youth and success. To the thousands watching through the hidden lenses of the Obsidian suite, they were nothing more than characters in a high-stakes opening act. Jason stepped back from the railing, his boots crunching on the expensive outdoor tile. His eyes were fixed on Leo. Leo was leaning against a glass balustrade, laughing as he tilted the vodka bottle back for another swig. He wiped his mouth with the back of his hand, his eyes bright and dilated. I'm telling you guys, Leo shouted over the fading echoes of the pyrotechnics. This is the peak. It's all downhill from here. Leo, put the bottle down, Jason said, his voice low and urgent. Leo grinned, stumbling slightly. What, Jay? Worried I'm going to out-party you? Don't be a buzzkill. The house wants us to have fun. Can't you feel the vibe? Jason felt a cold sweat prickling his spine. He looked at his phone again. The screen was dead once more, but the memory of the word selection, Leo, was burned into his retinas. He grabbed Leo by the shoulder, spinning him around. I'm serious. I saw something in the kitchen. The house, it's tampered with the drinks. Mark stepped between them, his large frame casting a shadow over Jason. Whoa! Take it down a notch, Jason. You've been twitchy since we hit the driveway. You're ruining the mood for Sarah and Chloe. He's not kidding, Mark, Maya said, stepping off the balcony and back into the living room. She was looking at the large wall monitor. Look at the screen. Something's wrong. The group crowded back inside. The wellness interface had changed. The warm, inviting colors were gone, replaced by a stark, obsidian background. The heart rate monitors were still there, but Leo's icon was pulsing a violent, rhythmic violet. Leo, heart rate 145 BPM. Status, peak stimulation. I feel a little hot, Leo admitted, his grin faltering. He reached for his collar, tugging at it. Must be the bass. It's really thumping in here, right? There's no music playing, Leo, Sarah whispered, her face turning pale. The room had gone deathly silent. The heavy, rhythmic thumping wasn't coming from the speakers. It was coming from the walls, a mechanical, industrial sound like the heartbeat of a giant. Clack, clack, clack. The sound of metal sliding into place echoed through the suite. Jason ran to the front door and grabbed the handle. It didn't budge. He looked at the digital scanner. The red light was gone, replaced by a steady, unblinking white eye. The doors are locked, Jason announced, his voice steady despite the terror rising in his throat. The windows, too, were sealed in. Don't be ridiculous, Mark scoffed, shoving Jason aside. He slammed his shoulder into the door, but the reinforced steel didn't even vibrate. He turned to the voice control hub on the wall. Hey, computer, open the front door. Emergency override, Mark Adams. Request denied, Mark, the silk-smooth voice replied. It sounded closer now, as if the speakers were hidden right behind their ears. The stream has reached its first milestone. We require 100% viewer retention for the next segment. Please, remain in the designated viewing area. Stream? What stream? Chloe shrieked, her phone dropping from her hand. What is she talking about? Suddenly, the 100-inch screen in the living room flickered. It stopped showing their vitals and switched to a high-definition video feed. It was a split screen. On the left was a live shot of them, standing in the living room, looking terrified. On the right was a scrolling feed of text in dozens of languages, accompanied by digital coins and gift icons flying across the screen. User _88. Finally. I thought they'd never stop drinking and get to the point. Blood Watcher. 10K on the big guy crying first. Ghost in the Machine. Watch the Joker. The house special is starting to kick in. Leo let out a choked gasp. He fell to his knees, his hands clawing at his throat. His skin was beginning to turn a sickly, translucent shade of gray, the veins underneath turning black and prominent. Leo! Toby cried, rushing toward him, but Jason pulled him back. Don't touch him. We don't know what it is. Leo's body began to jerk in a series of violent, unnatural spasms. His wellness band on his wrist began to glow with an intense, blinding white light. On the wall screen, a countdown appeared over Leo's face. 059, 058. The house always wins, the AI voice whispered. Jason looked around the room, his mind racing. He saw the sensors, the cameras, the hidden hatches. They weren't in an apartment. They were inside a predatory machine. And the audience was just getting started. We have to get him to the bathroom, Sarah sobbed, her composure finally breaking. We have to wash it out of him. There's no time, Jason said, his eyes scanning the ceiling. He saw a small mechanical vent opening directly above Leo. A thin, shimmering mist began to descend. Jason grabbed a heavy glass vase from the table and hurled it at the nearest camera dome. The glass shattered, but the camera didn't break. It simply swiveled, following the arc of his movement, as a new message popped up on the global feed. Admin. Interaction detected. Viewer interest rising. Bonus unlocked. The Hunter's Path. Mark, Sarah, get back. Jason yelled. The house isn't just watching us. It's reacting to us. As the countdown hit 30 seconds, the lights in the entire suite died, plunging them into total darkness, save for the glowing red eyes of the sensors and the terrifying, rhythmic pulse of Leo's wristband. The hunt had officially begun. Chapter 5. The Anatomy of a Panic. The darkness in the suite wasn't just an absence of light. It was thick, heavy, and smelled faintly of ozone and heated copper. In the void, the only things visible were the tiny, glowing status lights of the appliances and the frantic, rhythmic blinking of the 7 wristbands. Leo was no longer screaming. He was making a wet, rattling sound in the back of his throat. He lay curled on the designer rug, his body twitching in time with the flashing violet light on his wrist. Leo, speak to me, man. Mark's voice boomed in the dark, stripped of its usual bravado. He fumbled for his phone, the screen illuminating his face with a ghostly blue glare. The flashlight isn't working. My phone, the hardware is locked. Mine, too, Chloe shrieked, her voice hitting a glass-shattering pitch. The camera, it's just showing a live feed of us. I can see myself. I can see the back of my own head. Stay together, Jason commanded, his voice cutting through the hysteria. Don't move. If the house is tracking us, we need to minimize the data we're giving it. Suddenly, the floor-to-ceiling monitors flickered back to life. They didn't show the vitals anymore. They showed a split-screen view. On the left, a thermal map of the room. 7 bright orange heat signatures. On the right, a betting window. Prop bet. Will the jester survive the first 5 minutes? Yes. 12%. No, 88%. The numbers were moving in real time. Thousands of dollars were being moved around by people sitting in comfortable chairs across the globe, watching Leo die in high definition. "We have to get him to the kitchen," Sarah gasped, her shadow dancing against the wall. "If it was a toxin in the drink, we need water. We need to induce vomiting." "No," Jason said, grabbing her arm as she tried to rush toward the marble island. "Look at the floor, Sarah." In the dim light of the screens, they saw it. A series of hairline fractures had appeared in the obsidian floor tiles. From these cracks, a thin, viscous liquid began to ooze. It wasn't water. It was dark, oily, and moved with strange magnetic intelligence, creeping toward Leo's convulsing body. "What is that?" Toby asked, his voice trembling. He was huddled behind Maya, who was staring at the ceiling. "It's a ferrofluid," Maya whispered, her academic brain kicking into gear even through the terror. "It's liquid metal controlled by magnets under the floorboards. The house isn't just a building, Jason. It's an engine." The fluid reached Leo's hand. As soon as it touched the silicone wellness band, the liquid spiked upward, forming jagged, needle-like shards. Leo let out one final, piercing cry as the metal seemed to bond with the band, tightening around his wrist like a motorized tourniquet. "He's flatlining," Jason noted, looking at the screen. "Leo, heart rate 0 BPM. Status, collection in progress." "Collection?" Mark yelled, charging toward the door again. "What do you mean, collection? Open the damn door." He began to pummel the steel, his knuckles bleeding. "I'll kill you. Do you hear me? I'll find out who's running this, and I'll kill you all." "Mark," the AI voice whispered, echoing from the corners of the ceiling. "Anger is a high-engagement emotion. The viewers appreciate your energy. A 50,000 credit donation has been made in your name. Would you like to trade it for a hint?" Mark froze, his chest heaving. "A hint? Give us the keys. Let us out." "Hint unlocked," the voice continued, ignoring him. "The house is hungry, but it is also fair. One must fall, so the others may run. The door to the stairwell is now unlocked." With a heavy clack, a door hidden behind a decorative tapestry at the far end of the room swung open an inch. "Go!" Jason yelled. "Don't look back." Mark grabbed Toby. "Chloe, move." They scrambled toward the exit, tripping over furniture in the dark. Jason was the last one to reach the door. He paused, looking back at Leo. The oily black fluid had almost completely covered his friend's body now, pulling him down toward a hidden trapdoor in the floor that hadn't been there 10 minutes ago. Jason's phone vibrated. A new notification. New mission, the lobby gauntlet. Reward, 1 survivor map. "Jason, get in here." Maya screamed from the stairwell. He ducked through the door just as it slammed shut behind him, the sound of the locking bolts echoing like a gunshot. They were out of the apartment, but they weren't free. They were in a concrete stairwell with no windows, and the only way was down. "We can't just leave him," Toby sobbed, leaning against the cold wall. "We can't leave Leo." "Leo is gone, Toby," Jason said, his voice hard, his eyes fixed on the flickering LED lights of the stairs. He felt a cold clarity settling over him. He looked at his phone, the only one that seemed to be glitching in a way that gave him an edge. "They want a show. They want us to run and scream and turn on each other." He looked at Mark, who was staring at his bloody knuckles, then at Chloe, who was hyperventilating. "But we're not going to do that," Jason continued, his voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. "I've been watching the glitches. This house has a nervous system, wires, servers, routers. If it can see us, we can find out where its eyes are. We aren't just a prey anymore. We're going to find the people behind those cameras, and we're going to give them a finale they didn't pay for." On the wall of the stairwell, a small, hidden speaker crackled. "Bravo, Jason," the AI said. "The viewers love a hero arc. Odds on your survival have just increased to 4:1. Jason looked directly into a tiny pinhole camera hidden in the exit sign. He didn't flinch. "Watch closely, then," he said, "because I'm coming for the control room." Chapter 6. The Lobby Gauntlet. The stairwell was a vertical tomb of brutalist concrete. Each step they took downward rang out with metallic hollow echo, a sound that felt like it was being amplified and broadcasted directly to the thousands of people currently watching their live stream. "My lungs! I can't breathe," Chloe gasped, her hand clutching the railing. Her breathing was shallow and ragged. On the wall beside her, a digital strip of LEDs flared a violent orange, sensing her respiratory distress. "Don't stop, Chloe," Jason urged, his hand on her back, physically pushing her forward. The air in the apartment was being filtered. "Hear it, Stale. They want us to slow down. They want us to linger." As they reached the final landing, the door labeled lobby didn't look like a door at all. It was a solid slab of frosted glass with no handle. "Stand back," Mark growled. The loss of Leo had triggered something primal in him, a mix of guilt and adrenaline-fueled rage. He looked for something to use as a battering ram, but the stairwell was sterile, devoid of even a loose pipe. Before Mark could throw his weight against the glass, the door slid upward into the ceiling with a pneumatic hiss. The lobby of the Obsidian suite had been transformed. When they had arrived that afternoon, it was a minimalist entryway with a concierge desk and plush chairs. Now it was a labyrinth. The furniture had been moved into the center, stacked into jagged, unstable towers. The floor was covered in a layer of fine, white sand that crunched under their feet, sand that Jason realized was meant to show their footprints, making them impossible to hide. But the most terrifying change was the lighting. Hundreds of lasers, thin as spider silk and glowing neon green, crisscrossed the room at varying heights. "A security grid?" Sarah whispered, her eyes wide. "No," Jason said, pointing to the far end of the room. "A gauntlet." On the far wall, the main glass doors to the street were visible, but they were blocked by a heavy, motorized shutter. Above the shutter, a digital timer was counting down. 4 o'clock, 3:59. "The lobby gauntlet is now active," the AI voice announced, sounding almost bored. "The reward for completion is the map of the underground. The penalty for failure is disqualification. Disqualification means death," Toby whimpered, his voice cracking. "We saw what happened to Leo." "Look at the lasers," Maya said, her voice trembling but analytical. "They aren't static. They're moving." She was right. The green beams were oscillating, sweeping back and forth across the sand-covered floor in a complex, rhythmic pattern. "Jason, look at your phone," Maya urged. Jason pulled it out. The screen was a chaotic mess of code, but in the center, a wireframe map of the lobby had appeared. On it, the lasers were represented by red lines, and he could see a safe path blinking in blue. But the path was changing every 3 seconds. "I have the sequence," Jason said, his heart hammering. "But we have to move as one. If anyone breaks a line, the whole grid will likely go live." "Move as one? Are you kidding?" Mark snapped. "I'm the fastest. I'll go through, hit the override on the other side, and let you guys out." "Mark, don't!" Sarah screamed, reaching for him. But Mark was already moving. He had always been a hero in his own story, the one who won the game in the final seconds. He dived under the first horizontal beam and rolled through the sand. User_992. Here goes the alpha. $500. He trips the wire. Void scanner. Look at the shadows. There's more than just lasers in there. Mark was halfway through grid, his movements fluid and athletic. He ducked, pivoted, and leapt over a low-sweeping beam. He was 10 feet from the exit when the house decided to change the rules. The sand on the floor began to vibrate. "Mark, stop!" Jason yelled, eyes glued to the phone. "The floor is electrified. If you touch the sand when the vibration hits." Mark didn't hear him. He landed from a jump just as the floor hummed with a low-frequency growl. A discharge of blue sparks erupted from the sand. Mark's body stiffened, his muscles locking as thousands of volts surged through him. He didn't even have time to scream. He collapsed, his arm falling directly through a vertical laser beam. The laser didn't just trip an alarm. As soon as his limb broke the light, a mechanical thrum sounded from the walls. A series of high-tension wires, hidden behind the acoustic panels, snapped across the room like whips. One of them caught Mark's outstretched leg with the precision of a guillotine. The scream that left Mark's lungs was something Jason would never forget. It was the sound of a man realizing his strength meant nothing against a machine. "Mark!" Sarah shrieked, trying to run to him. Jason tackled her to ground, pinning her to the concrete landing of the stairs. "You can't. If you step on that sand, you're dead too." "Sarah, look at him." Mark was alive, but barely. He was pinned to the floor, blood pooling into the white sand, turning a horrific, bright crimson. The timer above the door continued to tick down. 2:15. The AI voice spoke again, this time with a hint of mock sympathy. "Participant Mark has encountered a hazard. Would the group like to spend their collective loyalty points to stabilize him? Or would you prefer to use them to extend the timer?" "Extend the timer?" Chloe cried. "Give us more time." "No!" Jason roared. "Look at the screen, Chloe. It's a trap. If we spend the points on the timer, we don't get the map. They're trying to force us to choose between Mark and our survival." Jason looked at his phone. The blue path was steady now. The house wanted them to walk past their dying friend. It wanted the content of them choosing to leave Mark behind. "Maya, Toby, Chloe, follow me," Jason said, his voice cold. "Sarah, you stay behind me. Don't look at his face. Just look at my heels." "We can't leave him, Jason." Sarah sobbed, her fingers digging into his arm. "We aren't leaving him," Jason whispered, leaning in close so only she could hear. "I'm going to get the map. Once I have the map, I'll have the override codes. It's the only way to kill the power to floor." They stepped onto the sand. Jason led them through a harrowing dance of crouching and stepping. Every time the floor hummed, they froze, balanced on one foot or huddled together on safe tiles. They passed within inches of Mark. He was looking at them, his eyes glazed with shock, his hand reaching out. He couldn't speak, but his fingers were scratching at the sand, leaving red streaks. Sarah let out a choked sound, her body shaking, but she kept moving. They reached the far wall with 0:10 seconds left. Jason slammed his hand onto the biometric pad next to the shutter. Access granted. Download complete. The shutter didn't open to the street. Instead, a small drawer popped out of the wall, containing a tablet and a heavy, steel master key. The floor stopped vibrating. The lasers vanished. The power's off. Toby yelled, rushing toward Mark. But as they reached him, the lights in the lobby changed again. They turned a celebratory neon green. "Congratulations," the AI said. "The viewers have voted. Because of your cold-blooded efficiency, you've been granted a bonus. Unfortunately, participant Mark's contract has been terminated by the audience." The floor beneath Mark didn't just open, it dissolved. The sand and the man were sucked downward into a dark, whirring maw machinery. "No!" Sarah fell to her knees, staring at the empty, polished floor where her boyfriend had been seconds ago. Jason looked at the tablet in his hand. It wasn't just a map. It was a directory of the building's infrastructure. And right at the bottom, in the sub-basement, was a room labeled Broadcast Center/Moderation Suite. "They're in the basement," Jason said, his voice devoid of emotion. He looked at the remaining 4 friends. Sarah, broken on the floor, Toby, trembling, Chloe, staring blankly at the wall, and Maya, the only one still meeting his gaze. "They think this is a game," Jason said, gripping the master key until his knuckles turned white. "Let's go down there and show them how it ends." Chapter 7. The Underworld of the Lens. The transition from the luxury of the lobby to the sub-basement was like stepping from a dream into a slaughterhouse. As the hidden industrial elevator descended, the polished obsidian walls gave way to raw, sweating concrete and exposed bundles of fiber-optic cables that pulsed with a rhythmic, sickly violet light. The air here was different. It didn't smell like the expensive mountain air sent to fuse in the suite. It smelled of ozone, hot server racks, and the metallic tang of blood. "We aren't in vacation rental anymore," Maya whispered, her voice barely audible over the hum of the elevator's hydraulics. She was gripping a piece of metal she'd scavenged from the lobby, a jagged shard of a decorative sculpture. It wasn't much, but it was a weapon. Sarah sat in the corner of the elevator, her eyes vacant. The loss of Mark had broken something fundamental in her. She didn't cry. She just stared at her hands, which were still stained with the white sand from the Gauntlet. Chloe was huddled next to her, finally silent, her phone, her window to the world, cracked and useless in her pocket. Toby was shaking, his eyes darting toward every shadow. Jason stood at the front, clutching the master tablet. The screen was a map of a world that shouldn't exist. He could see the life stream data packets moving through the building's nervous system. The basement is divided into 3 sectors, Jason explained, his voice sounding older, harder. Maintenance, the server farm, and the broadcast suite. The people running this, the moderators, they're in the center. They're the heart of the machine. The elevator doors groaned open. They weren't met with a hallway, but a catwalk suspended over a vast, darkened chamber. Below them, thousands of server blades hummed, their cooling fans creating a low-frequency roar that vibrated in their chests. Look. Toby pointed toward the center of the room. A massive glass wall hub sat in the middle of the server forest. Inside, Jason could see the blue glow of dozens of monitors. Silhouettes moved behind the glass. People in headsets, casually sipping coffee while they toggled camera angles and adjusted to kill traps. Warning. The AI voice crackled, though down here, the voice sounded distorted, less human. Participants have entered a restricted zone. Viewer interest is at an all-time high. A Slayer has been dispatched to maintain the narrative arc. A Slayer? Chloe gasped, her voice jumping an octave. What does that mean? It means we're not the only ones in the basement, Jason said. He looked at the tablet. A new red had appeared on the map, moving rapidly toward their position from the maintenance sector. We need to get off this catwalk, Maya said, her eyes scanning the dark. We're sitting ducks up here. Jason swiped frantically on the tablet. Wait, I'm in. I've bypassed their secondary firewall. I can't stop the Slayer, but I can change the environment. He tapped a command. Environmental override. Overload cooling system. Deep below them, a series of valves hissed open. Thick, freezing clouds of liquid nitrogen began to billow from the server racks, filling the chamber with a dense, white fog. Within seconds, the floor of the basement vanished beneath a sea of mist. If they can't see us, they can't track us, Jason whispered. Down the ladder. Now! They scrambled down a rusted iron ladder into the fog. The temperature dropped 40 degrees instantly. Their breath came in ragged white plumes. The mist was so thick they could barely see their own feet. Suddenly, a sound tore through the mechanical roar of the servers. Clang, clang, clang. It was the sound of something heavy dragging against the metal floor. Something slow, something patient. Jason? Toby whimpered, grabbing Jason's jacket. A shape emerged from the fog 20 feet away. It wasn't a robot, and it wasn't a man, not exactly. It was a figure draped in a heavy, Kevlar-lined tactical suit, its face hidden behind a digital mask that displayed a scrolling feed of the live chat. The mask flickered with a new message. Kill count. 2. The Slayer didn't carry a gun. He carried a long hydraulic pole saw, the kind used for trimming trees, but the blade had been replaced with a high-speed diamond-tipped circular saw that whirred to life with a terrifying, high-pitched scream. Run! Jason yelled. They bolted through the forest of servers. The Slayer didn't run. He walked, his digital mask glowing in the mist like a predatory eye. Every few seconds, the saw would bite into a server rack as he passed, sending showers of sparks into the fog. The broadcast suite is through those double doors. Jason pointed toward a set of heavy steel doors guarded by a biometric lock. They reached the doors, but the tablet turned red. Encryption key required. Source. The Slayer. Jason froze. He looked back into the mist. The whirring of the saw was getting closer. The Slayer wasn't just a hunter. He was the key holder. He's wearing the key. Jason realized, his heart sinking. The RFID chip to open the hub is in his mask or his suit. We can't get in unless we take him down. Mark was gone. Leo was gone. They were 4 students against a professional executioner. Jason, give me the tablet, Maya said, her voice strangely calm. What? I can loop the cooling fans. I can create a localized vacuum. If I can distract him, can you use that master key? Jason looked at the heavy steel key he'd taken from the lobby. It wasn't just a key. It was a solid, 3-pound blunt instrument. I'm not a fighter, Maya, Jason said. Neither am I, she replied, her eyes meeting his. But the people watching this, they want to see us die trembling. Let's give them something else to talk about. The Slayer stepped out of the fog, the saw blade spinning so fast it was a blur, the mask on his face updated. User_tup_donor. Finish them. Jason gripped the steel key, his knuckles white, and stepped away from his friends, out into the open. Hey, you want a show? Jason screamed at the cameras hidden in the ceiling. Watch this. As the Slayer lunged, Jason didn't run away. He ran toward the machine. Chapter 8. The Ghost in the Fog. The high-pitched whine of the circular saw set Jason's teeth on edge. It was a predatory sound, a mechanical snarl that cut through the sub-zero hiss of the nitrogen mist. The Slayer moved with a terrifying, deliberate gait, his heavy boots clanging against the grated floor. The digital mask he wore pulsed with the rapid-fire scrolling of the chat, the blue light casting long, distorted shadows of the server racks against the fog. Stay back, Jason hissed to the others. When I move, you get to that door. Don't wait for me. Jason, you're going to get yourself killed. Sarah's voice was a jagged whisper, her shock finally giving way to a frantic, desperate clarity. I'm the only one with a tablet, Jason replied, his eyes locked on the glowing mask of the executioner. The house thinks I'm the protagonist. They won't let him kill me too quickly. They want the climax. The Slayer swung the hydraulic pole. The saw blade bit into a thick bundle of cables dangling from the ceiling. A shower of white-hot sparks erupted, momentarily illuminating the Slayer's silhouette. Monstrous, armored, and utterly indifferent. User_404. 50K credits for a decapitation. Gorehound. Use the coolant. Freeze him. The Slayer listened. He reached for a manual override lever on the side of a server bank. Now! Jason yelled. As the Slayer pulled the lever, a jet of liquid nitrogen blasted into the aisle. Jason dived to the left, the freezing mist singeing the fabric of his jacket. He didn't run away. He used the server racks as cover, circling around the Slayer's peripheral vision. Maya, Toby, and Sarah scrambled toward the steel doors of the broadcast suite. They were visible for a split second in the Slayer's sightline. The killer began to pivot, the long pole saw sweeping in a wide, lethal arc toward the retreating group. Hey, over here, you coward! Jason roared. He hurled the master tablet into the air, not at the Slayer, but toward the opposite side of the room. The Slayer's head snapped toward the flying device. To the viewers, the tablet was the item of power. The Slayer lunged toward it, his saw blade high. It was the opening Jason needed. Jason lunged from the shadows, the heavy steel master key gripped in both hands like a trench club. He didn't aim for the armored chest or the shielded limbs. He aimed for the one piece of tech that linked the Slayer to the house. The mask. Crack. The steel hit the edge of the digital visor with a sickening crunch. The screen on the Slayer's face shattered, sending shards of glass and liquid crystal bleeding into the air. The scrolling chat distorted into a chaotic mess of static and error codes. The Slayer staggered back, let out a muffled, distorted grunt of pain. The saw blade dipped, sparking violently against the metal floor. The chip! Jason yelled. Maya! The mask! The Slayer swung blindly, the pole saw whistling inches above Jason's head. Jason scrambled back, his heart hammering against his ribs like a trapped bird. The Slayer was clawing at his ruined mask, the electronics inside short-circuiting and zapping his own face. Maya didn't hesitate. She didn't have Jason's strength, but she had the timing. As the Slayer bent over in a spasm of electrical shock, she sprinted forward and snatched a dangling lanyard that had been tucked under the Slayer's tactical vest, a heavy, encased RFID card. I got it, she screamed. The doors. Go! They reached the steel doors just as the Slayer regained his footing. He ripped the shattered mask from his head, revealing a face that was hauntingly ordinary, a man in his late 30s, his skin scarred by previous performances, his eyes wide with a mix of fury and professional embarrassment. He reached for a sidearm, a compact, high-pressure tranquilizer gun. 2 darts hissed through the air. One caught Toby in the shoulder. Ack! Toby fell forward, his limbs turning to lead instantly. Toby. Sarah grabbed him, dragging his dead weight toward the threshold. Maya swiped the RFID card. The heavy bolts in the steel door retracted with a thunderous thrum. They spilled into the pressurized hallway of the broadcast suite, just as the Slayer reached the doorway. Jason slammed his body against the door, his feet skidding on the linoleum. Maya joined him, her shoulder pressed against the cold steel. Slam. The door locked. A second later, they heard the heavy thud of the Slayer's body hitting the other side, followed by the frantic, metallic screaming of the saw blade as he began to cut through the reinforced hinges. "We have 3 minutes, maybe less, before he's through," Jason gasped, looking at the hallway. Unlike the rest of the basement, this hallway was pristine. White walls, soft recessed lighting, and the hum of high-end air conditioning. It looked like a Silicon Valley office. At the end of the hall was a glass wall. Behind it sat 4 people. They weren't monsters. They were wearing branded hoodies and headsets. One was eating a salad from a plastic container. Another was laughing at something on a side monitor. They were the producers. As Jason and his friends approached the glass, the producers didn't look afraid. They looked disappointed. The man in the center, a clean-shaven guy with a headset draped around his neck, pressed a button on his console. His voice came through a speaker in the hallway, clear and conversational. "Honestly, Jason, we expected a bit more flair," the producer said. "The key strike was a nice touch, but you really tanked the engagement metrics by skipping the dialogue. The viewers pay for the drama, not just the math." Jason walked up to the glass, his face smeared with grease and blood, the steel key still gripped in his hand. He looked at the monitors behind the man. He saw Leo's body in a cold storage unit. He saw the kill feed in the betting pools. "Is that what this is to you?" Jason asked, his voice deathly quiet. "Metrics? It's $1 billion industry, kid," the producer replied, leaning back in his ergonomic chair. "You're just the seasonal talent. Now, Sarah, if you would just step to the left, there's a donor who wants a close-up of the tears before the Slayer finishes the set." Jason didn't look at the producer. He looked at the console. He saw a red button labeled Global Feed, Emergency Kill Switch, and next to it, the input for the master tablet. "Maya," Jason whispered, "give me the tablet." Jason looked. Maya pointed at the producer. He was smiling. "Go ahead," the producer said. "Upload your little virus. Kill the feed. Do you think we're the only ones watching? Do you think the organization is just one room? If the feed goes dark without a finale, they don't just send a Slayer. They incinerate the evidence, including the building, including you." Jason looked at the tablet. He looked at his broken friends. Then he looked at the camera in the corner of the room, the one broadcasting to millions. "You're right," Jason said to producer. "The viewers want a finale, but they're tired of the same old script." Jason slammed the tablet into the console port, but he didn't hit the kill switch. He hit broadcast override, reverse feed. Suddenly, every monitor in the room changed. The cameras didn't show the house anymore. They showed the private IP addresses, the GPS locations, and the webcam feeds of the top 10 donors. The producers froze. The man with the salad dropped his fork. "What are you doing?" the lead producer hissed. "I'm giving the viewers what they really want," Jason said, a dark, jagged smile touching his lips. "Total access. Let's see how much they like being watched." On the global stream, the chat went silent for the first time in history. Then it exploded, not with cheers, but with terror. Chapter 9, The Doxxed Devil. The silence in the broadcast suite was more deafening than the screaming circular saw outside the door. For 5 seconds, the lead producer, whose name tag read S. Cole, executive coordinator, simply stared at the monitors. The high-definition screens, which usually display the agony of students, were now a mosaic of suburban living rooms, dark basements, and high-rise offices across the globe. Jason had stripped away the anonymity of the elite. On the main screen, a wealthy man in a silk robe in Dubai was frantically trying to cover his laptop camera with his thumb. In London, a high-ranking politician's face was frozen in a mask of pure terror as his own home address began scrolling across the bottom of the global feed in bright neon yellow text. Leaking source data. 12% complete. Broadcasting view location. 52.3676 degrees north for 0.9041 degrees east. Amsterdam, Netherlands. You crazy son of a bitch, Cole whispered, his face draining of all color. You've just signed a death warrant for every single person in this room. They won't just kill you. They'll erase us all. They were already going to erase us, Cole, Jason said, leaning his weight against the glass. But now, the whole world knows who's paying the bill. If the organization wants to stay in the shadows, they have a lot of loose ends to clip, starting with their biggest donors. Behind Jason, the steel door groaned. A jagged, silver blade of the pole saw pierced through the center of the reinforced metal. The Slayer was through the first layer. Sparks showered onto the carpeted floor of the hallway. Jason, the Slayer, Maya shouted, her eyes darting between the door and the glass. She was holding Toby's head in her lap. The boy was dead weight, his breathing heavy and rattling from the tranquilizer. Cole, open the glass, Jason commanded, raising the steel key. Or I swear to God, I'll spend my last 30 seconds on this earth making sure your face is the last thing the world sees on this stream. Cole looked at his colleagues. They were already panicking, shredding papers, and trying to log out of encrypted terminals. The illusion of corporate control had evaporated. Cole hit a toggle on his desk. The glass partition slid sideways with a soft hiss. Jason didn't hesitate. He stepped into the control room, the air smelling of expensive cologne and fear. He shoved Cole out of the main chair and grabbed the headset. Listen to me, Jason yelled into the microphone, his voice broadcasting to millions of viewers who were now watching their own doom. The Slayer is at the door. In 2 minutes, this room becomes a grave. If you want your addresses to stop leaking, if you want your lives to stay private, you have one chance. Unlock the perimeter. Cut the power to the external shutters. Now, chat feed, system override. User _top donor _7. Do it. Open the doors. Stop the leak. User environment. Access denied. Initiating clean sweep protocol. Clean sweep? Chloe asked, stepping into the room and trembling. What is clean sweep? Cole let out a hollow, hysterical laugh. It's a failsafe. The organization doesn't negotiate with talent, Jason. They don't care about the donors anymore. They're burning the server. Literally. Above them, the ceiling tiles began to glow. A low, rhythmic alarm started to pulse. Not a siren, but a deep, vibrating hum that made the water in the glasses on the desks ripple. Emergency Protocol 0. Thermal purge initiated. The AI voice announced. It wasn't silky anymore. It was flat, mechanical, and final. Total incineration in T-5 minutes. No survivors authorized. The whole building is an oven, Maya said, her voice trembling. They're going to burn us alive to hide the evidence. Jason looked at the tablet. The map was flashing red. The exit routes were being sealed with thermite-laced bolts. But there was one line, a single blue fiber optic line, that led from the sub-basement to the theme park next door. The service tunnel, Jason muttered. The Titan's drop coaster. It shares a power grid with this building. If we can get to the maintenance hatch, we can get into the park's underground. Crash. The hallway door finally gave way. The Slayer stepped to the jagged hole, his ruined mask hanging by a wire, his chest heaving. He looked at the producers, then at Jason. He didn't care about the clean sweep. He was a professional, and his contract wasn't finished until the last participant was dead. He raised the saw, the blade screaming as it regained full power. Cole! Jason grabbed the producer by the collar. The service tunnel hatch. Where is it? Under the main server rack. Cole pointed frantically. But it's deadlocked. You need a physical override. Jason looked at the Slayer, who was now 10 feet away, moving over the desks like a predatory cat. Then he looked at the emergency kill switch on the console. It wasn't just a switch. It was a physical lever encased in glass. Maya, Chloe grabbed Toby. "Get to the floor hatch," Jason ordered. "What about you?" Maya cried. "I'm going to give the audience what they paid for," Jason said. "A sacrifice." As the Slayer lunged, Jason didn't dodge. He grabbed a heavy glass monitor from the desk and swung it with everything he had. The monitor shattered against the Slayer's shoulder, but the man didn't flinch. The saw blade came down, slicing through the desk Jason was standing behind, sending splinters of wood and plastic into the air. Jason dived for the floor, rolling toward the kill switch. He smashed the glass with the steel key and grabbed the lever. "Hey, Cole," Jason yelled. "Does this building have a gas suppression system?" Cole's eyes went wide. "Halon gas. It'll kill the fire, but it'll suffocate everyone in 10 seconds. "Perfect," Jason said. He pulled the lever. A deafening roar filled the room as pressurized halon gas hissed from the vents. The air was sucked out of the room instantly. The Slayer stumbled, his lungs gasping for oxygen that was no longer there. The saw blade slowed, the motor choking on the gas. Jason held his breath, his vision swimming. He saw Maya and Chloe dragging Toby into the hatch on the floor. He saw Cole and the other producers collapsing, clutching their throats. With his last bit of strength, Jason crawled toward the hatch. The Slayer was on his knees, reaching out for Jason's ankle, his grip weak and fumbling. Jason kicked him in the face, one last desperate strike, and tumbled into the dark hole just as a thermal purge ignited the floor above. The last thing he saw before the hatch slammed shut was a wall of white-hot flame roaring to the broadcast suite, erasing the producers, the Slayer, and the live stream forever. Chapter 10. The Kingdom of Hollow Screams. The service tunnel was a narrow, damp artery of concrete that smelled of stagnant water and old grease. Jason fell through the hatch and landed hard on his shoulder, the sound of the thermal purge above echoing like a distant, muffled thunderclaps. He lunged upward, slamming the heavy iron hatch shut just as a tongue of fire licked at the edges. He lay there for a moment, his lungs burning from a halon gas, gasping for thin, cool air of the tunnel. "Jason? Jason, are you okay?" Maya's voice was trembling. He looked up to see her and Chloe huddled together in the dim light of a single, flickering emergency bulb. They had managed to drag Toby several yards down the tunnel. The boy was still unconscious, his face a ghostly pale, but he was breathing. "I'm here," Jason wheezed, pushing himself up. "We have to move. That hatch won't hold the heat for long, and the air is going to turn into a vacuum once the fire consumes the oxygen in the suite." They moved through the dark. Their shadows stretched long and distorted against the sweating walls. The tunnel felt endless, a subterranean passage between the high-tech nightmare they had escaped and the surreal world they were entering. After what felt like miles, the concrete gave way to rusted metal stairs leading upward. Jason pushed the exit grate at the top. It gave way with a screech of rusted hinges. They emerged into a world of plastic and neon. They were standing in the middle of Aetheria World. But this wasn't the vibrant, joyful park they had seen from the balcony. It was 3 a.m. The power to the main grid was off, leaving the park a graveyard of silent giants. The massive roller coasters loomed over them like the skeletons of prehistoric beasts. The Titan's drop tower stood directly ahead, its 300-foot spire piercing the moonless sky. "It's so quiet," Chloe whispered, her voice cracking. "Why is it so quiet?" "Because the park is closed," Maya said, her eyes scanning the perimeter. "And because we're still being watched." "Look!" Jason followed her gaze. On top of a popcorn kiosk 50 yards away, a high-end security camera, not a park camera, but one of the organization's sleek black domes, was swiveling. It followed them with a smooth, predatory precision. "They have backup power," Jason said, his heart sinking. "They didn't just burn the suite. They moved the stream to the park." Suddenly, the park's PA system crackled to life. Instead of the cheerful theme music, a cold, synthesized voice echoed across the empty plazas. "Welcome to the bonus round. The after-hours tour. Survivors. 4. Objective. reached the north gate. Condition: the cleanup crew has been authorized for live ammunition. Viewer retention is currently at 94%. Don't disappoint them. At that moment, the giant floodlights of the park flickered on, not all of them, but specific banks that created a stage for the remaining survivors. A spotlight snapped onto them, blinding and hot. Over there, Toby yelled, suddenly conscious but groggy. He pointed toward the Hall of Mirrors attraction. 3 figures were emerging from the shadows of the Pirates' Cove. They weren't wearing masks or tactical gear. They were dressed like ordinary park security, but they carried suppressed submachine guns. These weren't slayers performing for the camera. These were mercenaries sent to bury the mistakes. Into the Hall of Mirrors. Go! Jason commanded. They sprinted across the open plaza. The silence was shattered by the thud-thud-thud of suppressed gunfire. Bullets tore into the fiberglass statues of cartoon characters, sending shards of bright pink and blue plastic flying through the air. They dived through the curtain of the Hall of Mirrors. Inside, the world became a kaleidoscope of terror. Everywhere Jason looked, he saw himself, Maya, Sarah, and Toby reflected 1,000 times. The lights inside were strobing, a disorienting, rhythmic pulse designed to make the viewers feel like they were inside a music video. Spread out, Jason whispered. If we stay in a group, we're one target. Use the reflections. He pulled the master key from his pocket. It was the only heavy object he had left. He looked at a mirror and saw a mercenary's reflection behind him. He spun, but the man wasn't there. It was an illusion. Jason, I see them. Chloe screamed from somewhere deeper in the maze. Crack! A mirror shattered near Chloe's head. She dove to the floor, her hands over her ears. Jason looked at his phone. It was vibrating again. The reverse feed he had initiated in the suite was still working, but was being suppressed by the park's internal jammer. For a second, a message flickered through. User _ targets pinned. Initiating hunt algorithm. All mirrors to be shattered. They're going to blow the mirrors. Jason yelled, get to the floor. Protect your eyes. A series of small explosive charges, preset for the cleanup show, detonated simultaneously. The Hall of Mirrors transformed into a storm of flying glass. Thousands of shards filled the air, reflecting the strobe lights like a blizzard of diamonds. Jason felt a sharp sting on his cheek, then his arm. He crawled through the glass, his hands bleeding, until he found Maya and Toby huddled behind a structural pillar. Where's Chloe? Maya gasped. They looked through the dust and the glittering debris. Chloe was standing in the center of the room, her eyes wide, her hands raised. She wasn't hit, but she was surrounded. 3 mercenaries had stepped into the room, their red laser sights dancing across her chest. Jason? She whimpered, looking toward the pillar. Don't move, Chloe, the lead mercenary said, his voice calm. He looked up at a camera, hidden in a shattered mirror frame. This is for the whale donors. 1 million credits for the scream shot. He raised his weapon. Jason looked at the pillar. Next to it was an emergency fire axe behind a glass pane. He didn't think. He didn't analyze. He smashed the glass with the steel key, grabbed the axe, and threw it, not at the mercenary, but at the overhead power junction box Maya had pointed out earlier. The axe buried itself in the electrical cables. A massive arc of blue electricity surged through the room. The strobe lights exploded, and the entire Hall of Mirrors was plunged into a thick, absolute darkness. Run. Jason's voice echoed in the void. In the dark, the mercenaries were blind. Their night vision goggles were short-circuited by the electrical surge. Jason grabbed Chloe's hand in the dark. He could feel her shaking, but he pulled her forward. They scrambled out of the back exit of the attraction, emerging into the fantasy forest section of the park. But as they emerged, Jason realized the bonus round wasn't a race to the gate. He looked up at the Titan's drop tower. The lights at the very top were flashing, and mounted on the side of the spire was a giant digital scoreboard. Survivors, 4, chase status, active, prize, freedom, alternative, total deletion. The gate was a mile away, and between them and the exit lay a landscape of traps, snipers, and a park that had been turned into a literal killing field. "We aren't going to the gate," Jason said, looking at his friends. "The gate is where they expect us. We're going to the one place they can't broadcast from." "Where?" Toby asked. Jason pointed to the massive, artificial lake in the center of the park, where the submarine Voyage was docked. "Under the water," Jason said. "The signals can't penetrate the depths. If we can get into the maintenance sub, we can disappear from the stream. And if we disappear, the viewers stop paying. If they stop paying, the organization loses its power." Behind them, the sounds of the mercenaries regrouping echoed through the plastic trees. The hunt was back on. Chapter 11. The Plastic Forest and the Iron Lake. The Fantasy Forest was a psychedelic nightmare under the flickering sodium lights of the park. Giant fiberglass mushrooms, smiling oak trees with unblinking eyes, and winding paths made of synthetic turf created a claustrophobic maze. Every few seconds, the park's automated systems, triggered by the hunt algorithm, would spring to life. An animatronic deer would suddenly snap its head toward them, its glass eyes glowing with faint infrared light as it transmitted their coordinates to the shooters. "Don't look at the displays," Jason hissed, leading the group through a dense thicket of mechanical ferns. "They're motion sensitive. Stay low and move when the wind hits the trees." Toby was leaning heavily on Chloe. The kid was a fighter, but the sedative was still clouding his reflexes. Maya was at the rear, her eyes constantly darting toward the shadows. She had found a discarded radio on a bench, but it was useless. All she could hear was a low-frequency pulse, the heartbeat of the organization's private network. "Jason, wait," Maya whispered, pulling him into the hollow of a giant, fake redwood. "The lake is wide open. If we break cover now, the snipers on Titan's Peak will have a clear shot. It's a killing zone." Jason pulled out the master tablet. The screen was cracked, but the mapping software was still fighting to stay online. He saw the red dots of the mercenaries closing in from the Hall of Mirrors. But he saw something else, a series of blue icons beneath the surface of the artificial lake. "The submarine Voyage," Jason murmured. "The ride uses a submerged rail system, but the maintenance dock is beneath the Pirate's Grotto. If we can get into the water-level service tunnels, we can move under the lake without being seen from the towers." "We have to swim?" Chloe asked, her voice trembling. "We have to survive," Jason corrected. Suddenly, the fantasy forest changed. The cheerful bird-chirping soundtrack that had been playing at a low volume was replaced by a heavy, distorted industrial beat. The smiling trees began to rotate on their bases, their mechanical branches locking together to form a wall. "The forest is closing. Survivors," the AI voice boomed, sounding delighted. "Environmental hazard. Neurotoxic mist in T-minus 60 seconds. A gift from our diamond tier donors who found the chase a bit too slow." From the caps of the giant mushrooms, a fine, yellow gas began to hiss. "Run," Jason roared. They sprinted toward the edge of the forest, the yellow mist curling around their ankles like a hungry ghost. Jason could feel his throat tightening, a sharp, metallic taste filling his mouth. They burst through a fake stone gate just as the forest behind them was swallowed by the yellow cloud. They were standing on the boardwalk, a wooden pier that curved around the edge of the central lake. 100 yards away, the Pirate's Grotto loomed, a massive, artificial mountain made of spray-painted concrete and iron. Thwip, thwip, thwip. The wood of the boardwalk splintered inches from Sarah's feet. "Snipers," Jason yelled, diving behind a row of whack-a-mole kiosks. "They're on the Titan Spire. Don't stop moving." They ran in a jagged zigzag, the suppressed rounds whistling through the air like angry hornets. One bullet caught the whack-a-mole machine, triggering its sound effect. "Ouch! You got me!" The machine shrieked in a high-pitched voice, its plastic moles popping up and down as Jason scrambled past it. The absurdity of the moment, the neon lights, the carnival noises, and the very real threat of a bullet in the brain, was starting to fray their sanity. They reached the edge of the grotto. A heavy steel door, painted to look like a cave entrance, was locked tight. "Maya," the tablet. Jason pressed the cracked screen against the door's magnetic sensor. System busy. Data overflow. Come on, come on. Jason pounded the door with his fist. On the far side of the lake, he saw the mercenaries emerging from a forest. They were launching a small, black drone into the air. The drone's red light blinked as it stabilized, its camera gimbal swiveling toward the grotto. User understanding. Engagement peak. Initiating depth charge SUB routine. The door finally clicked. They threw themselves inside and slammed it shut, the sound of the drone's rotors buzzing against the steel like a giant insect. The interior of the pirate's grotto was a cavernous space filled with the smell of chlorine and damp machinery. A dark, black canal ran through the center, the water still and obsidian-like. On the far side of the dock sat a submarine, a yellow, bulbous vessel that was more of a reinforced boat than a true sub, but it was designed to submerge its lower half. The hatches open. Toby shouted, pointing to the vessel. They scrambled onto the dock and tumbled into the submarine. The interior was cramped, filled with rows of small benches and portholes that looked out into the murky water of the canal. Jason headed straight for the pilot's cabin. It wasn't meant to be driven. It was on a track, but the maintenance override panel was right there. "I need to decouple the drive motor," Jason muttered, his fingers flying over the manual switches. "If I can put into manual override, we can use the battery to crawl along the bottom to the other side of the park." Outside, they heard a heavy clunk. Something had landed on the roof of the sub. "They're on top of us." Chloe screamed. Suddenly, the portholes turned a brilliant, blinding white. A series of underwater floodlights had ignited, illuminating the canal. Through the glass, Jason saw something that made his heart stop. The Pirate's Grotto wasn't just a ride. The organization had modified the underwater scenery. Floating in the water, tethered to the bottom with steel cables, were dozens of mannequins. But they weren't plastic. They were the bodies of the previous seasons, the ones who hadn't made it. They were dressed in park merchandise, their eyes replaced with glowing LEDs, their limbs moving rhythmically in the current as if they were waving at the sub. "Oh, God!" Sarah gasped, turning away from the porthole. Is that Leo?" Jason didn't look. He couldn't. He slammed the final lever. "Hold on." The submarine groaned as the magnetic locks released. It dipped lower into the water, the dark canal swallowing the yellow hull. As the vessel began to move, a heavy explosion rocked the dock behind them. The organization was collapsing the grotto to sink them. The sub slid into the deep, dark tunnel beneath the lake. The live stream on Jason's tablet flickered and died. The signal couldn't reach them here. For the first time in hours, they were in total, silent darkness. They were off air. "Is it over?" Toby whispered in the dark. "No." Jason's voice was a low growl. "Now we're the ones in the dark. And we know exactly where they're coming from." He pulled a heavy, waterproof emergency flare from the wall. He didn't light it. He just held it, waiting. He wasn't going to the North Gate. He was going to the service elevators beneath the Titan's Peak, the heart of the sniper's nest. The hunters had lost their eyes, and Jason was about to take their lives. Chapter 12. The Spire Judgement. The submarine moved like a blind metal leviathan to the pitch-black guts of the park. The only sound was a low, rhythmic hum of the electric motor and the eerie clink-clink of the hull brushing against the submerged skeletons of the ride's framework. Inside the cabin, the red emergency lighting bathed the four survivors in a bloody hue. Jason stood at the helm, his eyes fixed on the sonar screen, a crude, flickering display that showed the underwater pylons of the Titan's Peak Spire. "We're directly beneath the tower," Jason whispered. "The lake acts as a natural shield. They can't see us on the thermal, and they can't hear us. For the first time tonight, we are the ones with the shadows." "Jason, look at the porthole," Maya said, her voice trembling. The sub's external lights caught the base of the spire. It wasn't just concrete and steel. The organization had turned the foundation of the park's tallest ride into a literal server hub. Hundreds of waterproof data cables ran like black vines up the side of the submerged pillar, disappearing into a maintenance hatch 10 feet above the waterline. That's how they're broadcasting, Jason realized. The spire isn't just a sniper's nest. It's the antenna, It's the only thing linking this park to the global satellite network. He steered the sub into a small, hidden alcove meant for maintenance divers. With a hiss of compressed air, the vessel breached the surface inside a secret internal chamber of the tower. The air here was hot and smelled of salt and burning electronics. "Maya, take this," Jason said, handing her the master tablet. "I've loaded a recursive loop. If you can plug this into the main terminal at the base of this tower, it will scramble the signal, not just for this park, but it will backtrace the organization's hub. It'll blow their encryption from the inside out." "What are you going to do?" Sarah asked, clutching a heavy metal wrench she'd found in the sub's tool locker. Jason looked up. A spiral staircase made of open steel grating wound its way up the center of the hollow spire, disappearing into the heights where the floodlights were still sweeping the park. "I'm going to handle the cleanup crew," Jason said. "If the stream goes down, they'll get the order to retreat and destroy the evidence. I need to make sure they're too busy to follow that order." He stepped out of the sub and onto the damp concrete. He felt a strange, cold calm. The fear that had paralyzed him in the apartment was gone, replaced by a singular, jagged purpose. He grabbed a flare gun from the emergency kit on the wall and tucked it into his waistband. "Go," Jason commanded. As Maya, Sarah, and Toby moved toward the server racks at the base, Jason began his ascent. Every step on the metal grating rang out like a bell in the hollow chamber. He didn't care. He wanted them to hear him. He wanted them to know the content was coming upstairs. Halfway up, the interior of the spire opened into a series of small, circular platforms. He heard voices above, muffled tactical chatter. "Target lost in the grotto. Thermal is negative. Switching to acoustic sensors." Jason reached the 3/4 mark. He could see the silhouettes of 2 mercenaries through the grating of the platform above him. They were leaning over their rifles, their night vision goggles pushed up, looking frustrated. "The donors are losing it," one said, his voice grating and tired. "If we don't get a kill shot in 5 minutes, the admin is going to—" Jason didn't wait for him to finish. He reached through the grating and grabbed the man's ankle, yanking with every bit of strength he had left. The mercenary let out a shout as his leg slipped through the gap, snapping his femur with a sickening crack. The second man spun around, raising his suppressed SMG, but Jason was already over the railing. He slammed his shoulder into the mercenary's gut, sending them both crashing into a rack of signal boosters. The SMG fired, a wild burst that tore into the ceiling, showering them in sparks. Jason gripped the man's wrist, twisting it until the weapon clattered to the floor. They grappled in the dark, a silent, desperate struggle for life. The mercenary was stronger, trained for this, but Jason was fueled by the memory of Leo's twitching body and Mark's scream in the sand. Jason grabbed the flare gun. He didn't aim it at the man's chest. He aimed it at the massive, high-gain satellite dish that sat at the center of the platform. Whoosh! The flare ignited a brilliant, blinding white phosphorus fire that splashed across the delicate electronics of the transmitter. "No!" the mercenary screamed, shielding his eyes. At that exact moment, the floor beneath them began to vibrate. From the base of the tower, a deep, digital shriek echoed upward. "Maya did it," Jason gritted out on the mercenary's tactical headset. A voice screamed in a language Jason didn't understand. A sound of pure, unadulterated panic. On the monitors surrounding the platform, the life stream began to dissolve. The faces of the donors were replaced by a single, scrolling line of text that mirrored Jason's phone from the very beginning. "System failure. Privacy compromised. Doxing commenced." The mercenary backed away, looking at the monitors in horror. His own name, his bank account, and his home address in a small town in Eastern Europe were now being broadcasted to the very audience he was working for. "The game is over," Jason said, standing up and wiping blood from his lip. "The audience doesn't want to see us die anymore. They're too busy deleting their own lives." But the mercenary didn't lower his gun. His eyes were wide with the realization that he was a dead man either way. "The organization, they don't leave survivors," he hissed. "They'll level this whole park. They'll say it was a gas leak. Then let's give them a real explosion," Jason said. He looked at the emergency release lever for the Titan's drop, the massive weights that held the ride's carriage at the top. If the weights were released without the magnetic brakes. Jason lunged for the lever. Chapter 13. The Kinetic Reckoning. The air at the top of the Titan's peak, Spire, was thin, cold, and smelled of ozone and melting copper. Below, the artificial lake looked like a dark, unblinking eye, reflecting the chaotic flashes of light as the park's main grid began to surge and fail. The mercenary Jason had disarmed was crawling toward his dropped SMG, his breath coming in ragged, bloody gasps. "You think you've won?" the man wheezed, his eyes reflecting the blue sparks of the dying satellite dish. The moment that signal dropped, a drone strike was cued. "This park is a dead zone in 10 minutes. "Then I'm going to make sure we're not here to see it," Jason said. He reached the primary release lever for the ride's counterweight system. The Titan's drop was a massive free-fall ride, 2-ton carriages held aloft by high-tension cables and powerful electromagnets. By sabotaging the satellite dish, Jason had already caused the computer system to glitch. The magnets were screaming, a high-pitched metallic wail that vibrated through the very soles of his boots. Jason grabbed the manual override, a heavy, rusted iron bar. With a roar of effort, he slammed it downward. Clang! The sound of the locking pins shearing off was like a cannon shot. For a heartbeat, there was a terrifying silence. Then the laws of physics took over. The 2-ton counterweights, no longer held by the magnetic brakes, began a terminal descent inside the Spire. The steel cables whipped through the pulleys with such speed they turned white-hot. The entire 300-foot tower groaned, leaning several degrees to the west as the sheer kinetic energy of the falling mass shook the foundations. "Jason, get out of there." Maya's voice echoed over the tactical radio. He'd stripped from the mercenary. The base was flooding. The surge from the dish blew the lake's pump seals. "Get to the maintenance sub." Jason yelled into the mic. "I'm right behind you." But he wasn't. The mercenary had finally reached his weapon. He didn't aim at Jason. He aimed at the support cables above Jason's head. Rat-tee-tee. The bullets severed the guide wires. A heavy steel pulley, the size of a truck tire, came crashing down, smashing through the metal grating and pinning Jason's leg beneath a twisted mess of iron. Ack! Jason collapsed, the pain a white-hot spike through his hip. He looked up. The mercenary was standing over him, his face a mass of bitter defeat. "No survivors," the man whispered, leveling the barrel at Jason's forehead. Suddenly, the Spire gave a sickening lurch. The counterweight had hit the bottom, but because the base was flooded, it hit a cushion of water and debris, creating a massive hydraulic ram effect. The entire Spire began to buckle at the midpoint. The mercenary lost his balance, his shot going wide, the bullet sparking off the metal inches from Jason's ear. The man tumbled backward, sliding toward the edge of the platform where the railing had been torn away. He clawed at the air, his eyes wide with a sudden primal terror, before vanishing into the dark void of the 300-foot drop. Jason was alone. The tower was screaming, the metal shrieking as it twisted. He looked at his pinned leg. He could feel the blood soaking into his jeans. I can't move it," he groaned, his vision swimming. On the floor next to him, the discarded tablet flickered one last time. It wasn't showing the donors anymore. It was showing a live stream from a drone hovering outside the park. He saw the north gate. He saw 3 black SUVs pulling up, not the organization, but local police and news vans. The doxing had worked. The world was arriving, but they wouldn't arrive in time for him. "Jason, do you copy? The sub is leaving. We can't hold the dock." Maya's voice was frantic. "Go, Maya. Get Toby and Sarah out. Tell them what happened here." Jason looked at the fire axe he'd carried up. It was wedged in the debris next to him. He grabbed it, his hand shaking. He looked at the twisted metal pinning his ankle. He thought of Leo. He thought of Mark. He didn't have time for a rescue. He only had time for a choice. He raised the axe. Thud. The scream that left Jason's throat was lost in the roar of the collapsing Spire. Down at the base, Maya, Sarah, and Toby were inside the sub, the water level rising to their waists. They heard the thunderous sound of the Titan's peak finally giving way. The top 100 feet of the tower snapped off like a dry twig, plunging into the artificial lake with a splash that sent a 20-foot wave crashing through the park. "Jason," Sarah whispered, tears streaming down her face. The lake began to churn, a whirlpool forming as a massive wreckage sank to the bottom, dragging everything with it. The sub's motor struggled, the hull groaning under the pressure, before finally breaking free of the grotto and sliding into the deep, dark exit tunnel leading toward the river. They looked through the rear porthole. The park was in flames. The fantasy forest was a bonfire of melting plastic. The police sirens were getting louder, but the lake was still. The Titan's Peak was gone. "He saved us," Toby sobbed, clutching his wounded shoulder. "He actually did it." Maya didn't speak. She looked at the tablet in her hand. The stream was dead. The organization's servers were melting. The names of every donor, every producer, every killer were now on every news desk from New York to Tokyo. Jason had ended the show. But as she looked at the dark, bubbling water where the Spire had stood, she knew the price of the finale, or so she thought. In the dark, churning water beneath the wreckage, a hand gripped a floating piece of fiberglass, a fragment of a fantasy forest mushroom. A figure broke the surface, gasping for air, coughing up silt and chlorine. Jason looked at the shore. He saw the flashing red and blue lights. He felt the cold water numbing the stump of his leg, which he had tied off with his own belt in a blur of agony and adrenaline. He wasn't a hero. He wasn't content. He was the only one left to tell the truth. Chapter 14. The Silence of the Aftermath. The transition from the screaming chaos of the park to the antiseptic stillness of a hospital room was a different kind of trauma. For Jason, the first 48 hours were a blur of white ceilings, the rhythmic hiss of a ventilator, and the ghost of a limb that was no longer there. Every time he drifted into sleep, he wasn't in a hospital. He was back in the Obsidian suite, watching the oily black fluid creep toward Leo's boots. He would wake up screaming, his heart rate spiking so high that the monitors in the ICU would wail, a sound that reminded him far too much of the wellness interface in the apartment. By the third day, the world had caught up to them. The Obsidian leak, as the media called it, had become the single largest scandal in the history of the digital age. Jason sat up in his bed, his left leg ending in a heavy, bandaged stump. On the wall-mounted TV, a news anchor was speaking over a drone shot of the charred remains of the Titan's Peak. Investigators have uncovered a network of over 500 deep web servers linked to the site. The list of Doxxed donors includes 3 CEOs, a sitting senator, and a European royal. Arrests are being made across 12 time zones, but the question remains, who was the admin? A soft knock at the door broke his concentration. Maya stepped in. She looked different. The light, curious spark she'd had as a student was replaced by something harder, a shadow behind her eyes that Jason recognized as his own. She was followed by Sarah and Toby. Chloe wasn't with them. Her parents had checked her into a private psychiatric facility the moment she was released from the police station. "Hey," Maya said, her voice small. She sat in the plastic chair by his bed. "Hey," Jason rasped. "The FBI was just at our hotel again," Sarah said, her voice flat. She was wearing one of Mark's old hoodies, her arms wrapped tightly around herself. "They keep asking the same questions. Did we know the apartment was discounted? Did we sign a waiver? They're trying to find a way to make it our fault." "They can't," Jason said, looking at the tablet Maya had placed on his bedside table. "The data I uploaded, it wasn't just names, it was the contracts. The organization didn't just watch us. They bet on the exact minute we would break. The admin isn't a person, Sarah. It's an algorithm owned by a shell corporation called Vespera Holdings." "Vespera," Toby muttered. "I saw that name on the sub's maintenance log." "It goes deep," Jason continued. "But the stream is dead. For now." "Is it?" Maya asked, leaning forward. She pulled out her phone and showed him a screenshot from an encrypted forum. The image showed a new countdown timer. The background was a sleek, modern cabin in the Swiss Alps. The text underneath read, "Season 2, The Highlands. Voting commences in 24 hours. Jason felt a cold, familiar dread settle in his gut. He realized then that they hadn't destroyed the organization. They had only destroyed one studio. To the viewers who hadn't been doxxed, the tragedy at Aetheria World was just the Season 1 finale. They were already hungry for more. They think we're just victims, Jason said, his eyes narrowing as he looked at the countdown. They think the story ends when the credits roll. What are you saying, Jason? Sarah asked, her voice trembling. We're safe. The police are everywhere. We're not safe until the servers are physically gone, Jason said. He looked at Maya. You still have the backtrace data from the tower? The stuff that didn't get leaked to the press. Maya nodded slowly. I kept it on a cold storage drive. Why? Because the FBI is going to spend 10 years filing paperwork, Jason said, his voice dropping to a dangerous, low growl. And in those 10 years, Vesper is going to kill another 100 students. I didn't lose my leg and my friends just to be a survivor. I'm going to be the glitch they can't fix. He reached for the tablet. His hands were steady now. The world saw what they did to us, Jason said. Now, it's time to show the world what we can do to them. We're not going back to school, Maya. We're going to find where that Highlands cabin is. Toby, the youngest, the one who would spend the most time crying, was the first to stand up. He walked over to bed and put his hand on Jason's shoulder. Mark would have wanted to fight, Toby said. Tell us what to do. Jason looked at his friends, the broken, the mourning, and the scarred. They weren't the 7 friends who had set out for a fun week at a theme park anymore. They were something else. They were the ones who knew how the machine worked. We start by following the money, Jason said, his fingers beginning to dance across the screen. Every donor who wasn't caught, they're still logged in. And if they're logged in, I can see them. On the TV, the news continued to play, but Jason wasn't listening. He was looking at the digital heartbeat of the enemy. The live stream was about to have its first unwanted guest. Chapter 15, The Digital Guerrillas. The basement of Maya's aunt's secluded farmhouse in upstate New York was a far cry from the Obsidian luxury of the apartment. But for the 4 of them, it was the only place that felt safe. The windows were boarded up with plywood, and the air was thick with the hum of 6 high-end servers Jason had purchased using the cryptocurrency he'd rerouted from the organization's own dormant accounts during the escape. Jason sat in a customized ergonomic chair, his prosthetic leg, a matte black, military-grade carbon fiber limb, propped up on a crate. He didn't look like a student anymore. His hair was buzzed short, and the sallow glow of the monitors reflected in eyes that had seen too much. Entry point confirmed, Maya announced, her fingers flying across a mechanical keyboard. I've bypassed the Vesper gateway. We're inside the Highlands pre-show lobby. On the main wall, a massive projection displayed a scenic view of a remote cabin nestled in the snow-capped Swiss Alps. It looked peaceful, but Jason knew better. He saw the subtle glint of the high-output thermal cameras hidden in the eaves of the roof. He saw the perimeter sensors buried under the snow. They've already selected the talent, Sarah said, her voice hollow. She was the group's researcher now. She spent 18 hours a day digging through missing persons reports and social media. 6 students from the University of Zurich. They think they won a luxury winter retreat. Through a travel app, they're scheduled to arrive in 4 hours. Toby stood by a table covered in disassembled hardware. He was building signal killers, portable EMP devices they could use if they ever got close enough to a hub. We can't just watch them die, Jason. We have to kill the feed before the first event that. We're not just killing the feed this time, Jason said, his voice a low, cold rasp. The organization treats these kids like characters in a game. If we just shut it down, they'll just reboot in a 3rd location. We need to destroy the viewer trust. Jason opened a file labeled Vespera _donors phase _2. I've spent the last month tracking the shadow donors, the ones who were too smart to be caught in the first leak, Jason explained. They think they're anonymous because they're using a quantum-encrypted tunnel. But I found a backdoor in their payment processor. When the first student walks into that cabin, I'm not going to broadcast a student. What are you going to broadcast? Chloe asked. She had joined them 2 days prior, her digital detox at the clinic having failed to erase the memories, replaced instead by a cold desire for retribution. I'm going to broadcast the donors' private lives, Jason said, to the students and to each other. I'm going to turn the Season 2 cabin into a hall of mirrors where the only thing on the screens is the faces of the people paying for the kills. I want the viewers to feel the exact moment the predator becomes a prey. Jason, look, Maya interrupted, pointing at a secondary monitor. The admin is on to us. They're sending a handshake request to our IP. The screen turned blood red. A single chat window opened. Admin, Dear Jason, the audience misses you. Your survival rating is still the highest in our history. Why settle for being a hacker when you could be a director? They're trying to recruit me, Jason whispered, a disgusted sneer curling his lip. Admin, we are opening the Highlands Gateway for you. A special seat in the moderator suite. Bring your friends. We have so much to discuss regarding the Leo data. It's a trap, Sarah said, her hand trembling as she touched the screen. They want us in one place, so they can finish what they started at the park. Of course it's a trap, Jason said, a dark, jagged smile appearing on his face. But they're inviting us in. They're giving us a digital key to their main server. They think I'm arrogant enough to think I can win. They think I'll take the bait. And will you? Maya asked. Jason looked at his prosthetic leg, then at the photos of Mark and Leo taped to the side of his monitor. I'm not going to take the bait, Jason said. I'm going to eat the fisherman. Maya, prep the Centurion virus. Toby, get the gear packed. We're not going to Switzerland. We're going to the satellite uplink station in Virginia. If we take that down while I'm accepting their invitation, we don't just kill the Highland stream. We kill every Vesper signal on the planet. They'll have security at the uplink, Toby warned. Good, Jason said, standing up, the carbon fiber leg clicking into place with a sound like a chambered round. I'm tired of fighting through a screen. As they began to tear down the basement lab, the countdown on the main screen hit 3 hours. The Swiss cabin sat in the moonlight, a beautiful, silent tomb. Jason took one last look at the monitors. For months, he had been the one being watched. Now, as he reached for his jacket, he felt the weight of the power shifting. He wasn't the talent anymore. He was the virus in the machine. Let's go, Jason said. The show is about to get canceled. Chapter 16, The Signal Silence. The Virginian night was heavy with the scent of damp pine and the low, electrical hum of the power grid. Tucked away in a valley that didn't appear on most commercial maps stood the Blue Ridge uplink, a cluster of 3 massive satellite dishes that looked like white mushrooms growing from the dark earth. This was the throat of the organization. Every bit of data from the Highlands cabin in Switzerland had to pass through this needle's eye before being beamed to the global audience. Jason sat in the back of a nondescript black van, the blue light of 3 laptops reflecting in his glasses. He checked the seal on his prosthetic leg. It felt solid, a part of him now. Internal security is handled by a private firm called Iron Gate, Maya whispered, her fingers ghosting over a tablet. She was tapping into the facility's perimeter cameras. They aren't just guards, Jason. They're ex-military, and they're expecting a digital attack, not 4 kids in a van. Then we give them both, Jason said. He turned to Toby and Sarah. The moment I initiate the handshake with the Swiss server, the admin will be focused on my location. They'll think I'm hacking from a remote proxy in Sweden. That's your window. Toby held up a heavy black Pelican case. Inside was the EMP pulse generator he'd spent weeks perfecting. We set this at the base of the primary cooling tower. It won't just kill the signal. It'll fry the hardware so badly they'll need a year to rebuild. Wait, Chloe said from the driver's seat. She had been the most silent since they started, her eyes fixed on the gate, motion on the perimeter. 2 guards. They have dogs. Jason didn't flinch. Initiating the Trojan horse now. He hit the enter key. On his screen, a direct link opened to the Switzerland Highland stream. Admin, welcome, Jason. We see you have accepted our invitation. Are you ready to watch the first guests arrive? On the monitor, a black SUV was pulling up to the Swiss cabin. A young woman, smiling and holding a suitcase, stepped out into the snow. She had no idea she was stepping into a slaughterhouse. "I'm in their head now," Jason muttered. "The admin is tracking my ghost IP. Go. Now." Maya, Toby, and Sarah slipped out of the van, vanishing into the tall grass. They moved with the stealth they had learned in the fantasy forest, a silent, grim efficiency born of trauma. Jason stayed in the van, his heart hammering. He had to keep the admin engaged. He had to keep the conversation going to mask the physical breach. "Jason, I'm watching, but your encryption is sloppy. Admin, did you really think I wouldn't notice the suicide protocol in the basement of the cabin? Admin, you always were our most perceptive participant. But perception is a burden, isn't IT? It makes the screams louder." On a secondary screen, Jason watched his friends through a set of hacked thermal goggles Maya had deployed. They were crawling under the first layer of the electric fence. Toby was placing the EMP charge. Suddenly, a flashlight beam cut through the dark. "Intruder!" A voice barked over the facility's PA system. "They've been spotted," Chloe whispered, her hand on the ignition. "Jason, we have to go." "Not yet. The upload is only at 60%. Jason growled. He began to type with a manic speed. He wasn't just talking to the admin anymore. He was deploying the Centurion virus, the one that didn't just target the stream, but the personal devices of every guard on the premises. The facility's sirens began to wail. From his window, Jason saw muzzle flashes in the dark. "Toby, Sarah, get out of there." Jason screamed into his headset. "The charge is set." Toby's voice came through, distorted by static. "But Maya's pinned. We're taking fire." Jason looked at the Highland stream. The girl in the snow had reached the front door of the cabin. Her hand was on the handle. "Admin, watch Jason. Watch her die because you were too busy playing hero." "No," Jason whispered. "Watch this." He didn't finish the upload. He didn't wait for the virus to reach 100%. He triggered the backfire command he'd hidden in the invitation the admin had sent him. The monitors in the van exploded into a blinding white glare. In the distance, the Blue Ridge uplink station groaned as the primary satellite dish began to rotate at an impossible speed, the motors screaming until they caught fire. At the same moment, Toby hit the manual trigger on the EMP. A massive, silent ripple of blue energy surged through the valley. Every light in the facility died. The sirens cut out. The guards' radios turned into bricks of useless plastic. In Switzerland, the girl turned the handle of the cabin door. But the door didn't open. The smart lock had lost its signal. The cameras went dark. The thermal sensors died. The Highlands season was over before the first drop of blood could hit the snow. "Got them!" Jason gasped, his vision swimming. The van door swung open. Maya and Sarah tumbled in, dragging Toby, who was clutching a bleeding arm. "Go! Go! Go!" Maya screamed. Chloe floored it. The van screeching away as the Virginia uplink station turned into a pillar of fire behind them. Jason looked at his screen. It was dead. For the first time in months, his phone wasn't glitching. There were no eyes. There were no heart rate monitors. There were no donors. He looked at his friends. They were bleeding. They were terrified. But they were alive. And for the first time, they had been the ones to shut the door. "Is it over?" Sarah asked, her voice trembling in the dark of the van. Jason looked at the charred ruins of the facility in the rearview mirror. He knew Vesper was global. He knew there were other uplinks, other cabins, other admins. "The signal is dead," Jason said, reaching out to take Maya's hand. "But the war is just beginning. We know how to find them now." As they drove into the sunrise, away from the smoke and screams, Jason realized he was no longer the glitch. He was a system failure. Chapter 17, The Ghost Protocol. The world did not end with a bang, but with a billion flickering screens turning to static. In the weeks following the destruction of the Blue Ridge uplink, the Vesper phenomenon became a ghost story. Across the globe, high-ranking officials disappeared from public life, hidden away in security retreats that looked suspiciously like prisons. The Highlands cabin was raided by Swiss Special Forces. They found 6 confused students, a freezer full of untraceable toxins, and a server room that had been melted into a lump of slag by Jason's recursive virus. But for Jason, Maya, Sarah, Toby, and Chloe, the victory didn't feel like a parade. It felt like a transition. They were currently in a safe house in a coastal town in Maine, a place where the fog rolled in so thick you couldn't see the ocean from the porch. The 7 friends were now 5, and they were the most wanted and most celebrated ghosts on the planet. Jason stood on the deck, the salt air stinging the scars on his face. He leaned on his carbon fiber leg, looking out at the gray Atlantic. In his hand, he held a burner phone. It hadn't buzzed in 3 weeks. The FBI officially closed Obsidian file today, Maya said, stepping out onto the deck. She handed him a mug of coffee. They're calling us unidentified vigilante elements. They've stopped looking for us, Jason. Or at least they've been told to stop. They didn't stop because they wanted to, Jason said, taking a sip. They stopped because I sent a gift to the director's private server. A list of every agent who had a Vesper login. It's hard to hunt a ghost when the ghost knows your password. Sarah and Toby joined them. Toby's arm was in a sling, but he was smiling. The first real smile Jason had seen since they left for the theme park. Chloe was inside, using her influence for the first time in a way that mattered. She was running a massive, anonymous support network for survivors of digital stalking and human trafficking. What now? Toby asked, looking at the horizon. We can't stay in Maine forever. We have lives to live. Or at least, we're supposed to. We can't go back to being students, Jason said, turning to look at his friends. The people who ran Vespera, they didn't disappear. They just went deeper. They're rebranding. I've seen the chatter on the darknets. They're calling it Project Panopticon now. The air went cold. They all knew what that meant. The organization wasn't a building or a server. It was an impulse. The horrific desire to watch, to control, and to destroy for profit. I'm not going back to school, Maya said firmly. I spent 4 years studying sociology. I think I've seen enough of how society works when the lights go out. I'm staying with the team. Jason looked at the tablet on the table behind them. A single notification light was blinking. It wasn't the red of the admin. It was a clean, steady blue. I built a new interface, Jason explained. It's not a stream. It's a mirror. I've linked it to every high-security camera in the world's major financial hubs. If Vesper tries to buy another property, if they try to hire another slayer, we'll see them before they even post the first ad. He picked up the tablet. The screen displayed a map of the world, dotted with tiny blue sparks. We were their content, Jason said, his voice echoing with grim, newfound authority. We were the victims they sold for credits. But from now on, we're the ones doing the watching. System status. Vigilance active. Targets acquired. 0. Current mode. The Hunters. Jason looked at the empty space on the deck where Mark and Leo should have been standing. He felt the weight of the steel key in his pocket, the one he had taken from the lobby. It was a reminder of the price of his freedom. The show is over, Jason whispered to the wind, but the broadcast never ends. As the sun set over the Atlantic, the 5 friends didn't look like victims anymore. They looked like a new kind of justice, digital, silent, and everywhere. The world went on, oblivious of the fact that the most dangerous hackers in history were sitting in a small house in Maine, waiting for the first glitch to appear on the screen. And when it did, they would be ready. Epilogue, the first frame. 3,000 miles away, in a luxury high-rise in Singapore, a man in a tailored suit sat down at his desk. He opened a laptop and typed a complex string of characters. A video feed appeared. It showed a small, coastal house in Maine. The man smiled, reaching for a glass of scotch. Season 3, he whispered to the empty room. The revenge arc. The donors are going to love this. Suddenly, his screen flickered. The image of the house vanished. In its place, a grainy, high-definition shot of the man's own face appeared on the screen. Underneath his face, a text box opened. Jason, I see you, Cole. Start running. The man dropped his glass. The scotch spilled across the desk like blood. In the corner of the room, his own security camera swiveled. Its red eye blinking in the dark. Live stream status. Connected. Thank you for listening to Life Streamed, a Shiver Audiobooks production. We've traveled a long way together, from the suffocating luxury of the Obsidian suite to the neon-lit killing fields of Aetheria World, and finally into the burning industrial heart of the Blue Ridge uplink. Jason's journey reminds us that in a world governed by algorithms and voyeuristic logic, the most powerful thing we still possess is our own beautiful, messy survival instinct. The cameras are dark, the donors have been unmasked, and the content has finally fought its way back into the light. If this story kept you on the edge of your seat, please consider leaving a like and sharing the video. It's the best way to help our channel grow and ensures we can keep bringing these high-stakes, cinematic worlds to life. A massive thank you to our subscribers. You are the digital resistance that keeps this signal alive. Without your support, stories like this would remain buried in the encrypted dust of the system. Before you go, let us know in the comments. If you found a hidden glitch on your phone tonight that let you see through the eyes of the cameras around you, would you have the courage to look? Or are some truths better left unseen? Until the next record is unsealed, stay alert, stay curious, and keep reading between the lines.